Morning, Trainiacs. Just out for a run with the Peatster. Got in a good 15.5K. He's getting fit, really fit. Look out. So we just recently ran a survey now that world's kind of getting back-ish to normal. And we want to see how people have done over all of the restrictions with the past 16 months or so and what they intend to do and or change with all of their endurance training now that they've got a new lease on life. Did they train more? Did they train less? How did they change their train? Did they gain weight? Did they suffer from depression? Do they intend to race more, less, or the same going forward? How do they feel about Ironman after 2020? I'm going to share the results of that survey with you right now. All right, bud. We put it out on social media just for a couple of days. Some questions about how people did during the lockdown over the past 15 months or so. 357 people ended up taking the survey. Thank you to everyone who has taken it. And we've got some interesting data. Now, is this like scientifically valid and significant? No, absolutely not. Like, it's a type form survey. But I've actually found that there were some interesting findings in it that I really wasn't expecting. Let's dive into them. So the first question, and this is where I went like, holy smokes, I asked, throughout the pandemic, did you train more, less, or about the same? Now I just figured like across the board, just about everyone would be training less. And this is sort of a general theme that I picked up on. Actually, 45.6%, the largest percentage of people that answered this question actually ended up training more, whereas 32%, only about a third, trained less, and roughly 20% trained about the same. So what does this tell us? We don't know. Everyone's situation is different. I think there is that idea of like the COVID vacation, and we do hear of people that are all of a sudden saving a bunch of time because they don't have to commute into work, or maybe they can get their work done in 4 to 6 hours, and then they've saved an hour of commuting time, they've saved a couple of hours of work time, and they're able to train more. You know what? This was actually encouraging to see that more people are actually training more than we expected. That means it's going to be just a dogfight for a lot of people when we come back to racing, qualify for Kona. Because I'm in the less category. Now, it changed for just about everyone, with pools closing, with gyms closing, with no races. I was interested in finding out how people actually adapted their training. And what we saw was the largest amount of people said that they did more cycling, less swimming, not a surprise there with pools being closed, more running at 43.8%, more strength training, but then less strength training was right in behind. So people just marginally maybe did a little bit more strength training, but more than anything, what we want to see here, or the thing that I'm looking at, is what's the difference between the more cycling and the less cycling? So only about 20% of people said that they did less cycling. So we've got like, this is just kind of fuzzy math, around 32% of people that net did more cycling. Now comparing that to more running, we have 43.8% people that said that they did more running, and then 26.1% that said that they did less running. So instead of, remember, roughly a net of 32 that did more cycling, it's more like a net of 17 that did more running. So on average, people tended to go out, get on their bike more. That makes sense because the bike industry exploded. Something on that later. Personally, I did less swimming, I did a lot more strength training, I did probably a little bit less running, I did less cycling because overall my training just kind of went down. I ended up treating it as a big recovery year. Did you do any virtual races? I was a no on this, again, because of recovery year, but 41.5% of people, did virtual races. And this is great. What I actually heard from people in the industry who started hosting virtual races was that I think it was like 80% of the participants in these virtual races had never done a race before. And when they started polling all these people that had never done a race before, why are you doing these races now? They figured, well, it was going to be A whole bunch of answers about, well, I want to get healthy to ward off COVID if I catch it, like boost my immune system, get healthier. And one of the biggest answers that they actually got was that people felt confident enough to be able to do these virtual races because they didn't have to step up to a start line next to somebody with Nike Vaporfly 4% or go up to and do a triathlon with a $15,000 bike on the rack next to them. They felt more welcome to be able to challenge themselves, and I think that this is like actually a fantastic outcome in the sport because I think it's going to encourage businesses like ours, for example, to host more virtual events to allow people who aren't confident enough to actually step up to a start line with all these people looking at them, give them an option to still be able to race and get a medal and get a prize, and then continue to evolve in that sport after. I think it's great. Next, are you now back to training 100%? A little bit more skewed towards yes, but more or less split. 56.1% of people said yes, 43.9% of people said no. I would say I'm back to training, but it's different. I'm still training intensely, but up in Canada, we don't really have any races. Very hard for me to get over the border. So I'm back to train. I would kind of be a kind of in this. But this is good to see that people have got back into a routine now. Now, this is what I thought would actually be the case. Do you have a race scheduled yet? Most people have said no. This is what we're experiencing. Last year, our app peaked at around 712 athletes. It went down in the off season like it always does to around 512 athletes. And it's just recently started climbing back up kind of slowly to about 560 athletes. But it was more or less flat at 512 for all of the off season. We didn't see people come back because there weren't that many races to even think about training for and paying a subscription to an app to do training in preparation for nothing. So this is what I would expect. I would expect people have come back to the idea of training and they've got into a flow, but they just don't have races or maybe the confidence that races are going to happen yet to actually schedule those races. So this is encouraging for the endurance sports industry because people still aren't yet fully committed to getting into races. And when they start racing, that's when the industry grows. Next, as a result of the pandemic, do you plan to change your lifetime race goals at all? Most people said no. I didn't expect a whole lot of people would, but a good third of people said yes. And then we asked, how did you intend to change your race goals? And this is right in line with me. Enjoy racing more was the biggest answer. The most frequently said answer was enjoy racing more, followed by race more. This is exactly where I'm at. I want to race more and not necessarily worry about having to get on podiums and having to get PBs. I do want to be able to race more, come in and out of races, and just accept that they're not about PBs. It's about meeting people, it's about experiencing different races, it's about traveling to different countries and cities, and experiencing the community and the adventure of endurance sports as opposed to strictly PBs. Now, granted, not everyone said that because a quarter of people said they wanted to get more competitive. Totally cool. Another quarter also said that they wanted to race more non-Ironman events, a very interesting finding at the very end of this. And then there were race more running races, race less is 12.3%, and race swim runs. So people are thinking about changing slightly, but more than anything, just enjoy training a little bit more. Back up here, asking people, once they get back to normal training, do you intend to train with people? Most people said about the same, really just get back into the flow of things, but a good quarter said more. I want to train with people more. I think that's in line with people enjoying racing more, putting aside the idea of perfect training in favor of good training that you enjoy with people around. That's what I want to do, make it more community focused. Did you gain weight? Actually, about 2/3 said no. I thought it would be the vast majority said yes, but only about 1/3 did. If you did, don't feel bad, because down here, the people that said that they did gain weight, I did the numbers and the average amount of weight gained was a little bit over 10 pounds for the people that gained weight. I want to say that I ended up being at like 15 to 20, and doing that in front of 450,000 people kind of sucked. Next question here, with regards to the industry, did you have any difficulty buying any endurance sports equipment? A lot of people said no, but a lot of people said yes, and they had the most amount of difficulty buying bike things. Bike accessories, 63% of the people that had difficulty buying bike accessories. Almost half said that they had difficulty buying a bike. I myself am sponsored by Canyon, and I have the same stock that everyone else does pretty much, and I'm having difficulty getting bikes. So that's not shocking at all. There's just such a shortfall of everything in the world right now. Our motive kits right now are short, I think it's zippers. There's a zipper shortage in the world. There's just a shortage of everything in the world. And then there was an other, I don't know what it is. It's just a general shortage. Now, here were a couple of really interesting questions that I asked, and they were, what is your opinion about Ironman now as compared to before the pandemic? Almost 60% said worse. 37% said about the same, but only 3% said better. Now, here's where it gets kind of interesting. I said the same question about challenge. 54% said about the same. Now, 44.7% said better, and 1.4% said worse. Now, in this, you might think it's not as much of a blowout as you might expect, but when you look at the net difference, let's just take out the about the same and compare worse to better. It's a net difference for Ironman of a little over 56% of people that are saying worse. They have a worse opinion of Ironman. Whereas when we take out about the same for challenge and we do that net difference, 43.3% of people actually say better. So we're looking at 56% of people saying worse, whereas 43% of people are saying better for challenge. That is not a good thing for Ironman. And frankly, it makes me worried because it's not a good thing for our sport. That said, I think there's always going to be people that want to challenge themselves through endurance sports and stay healthy and live a better life through endurance sports. It might just not be with Ironman, and frankly, I think that that's a good thing because they're essentially a monopoly in our world of triathlon, and I think they need to be kept honest by having some challengers, whether that challenger is Challenge North America, which is now Clash, Challenge Worldwide, or other endurance events like trail running and running races and swim runs and all different types of adventures, as opposed to, unless you are doing an Ironman, it really doesn't count because, yeah, those are the only ones that anyone asks about. I want people to ask more about, are you healthy? Are you fulfilled? What kind of adventures? What kind of cool things have you done? So Trainiacs, that's it. Just a little bit of interest to see where everyone is at. It's clear that everyone is getting back to training and thinking about getting back to racing, creeping back up. Now, if you are in that mode of wanting to get your training, whether it is just for health right now, or you do have a race coming up, you can go check out our app at app.mymotive.com, where we have baseline fitness training to keep you just healthy and prepared to go into whatever endurance adventure you want, and then you can add on plans as you go. Or you can train specifically for those plans if you have plans and adventures in mind. And if you just want to see this infographic so you could share it or anything like that, I will put a link in the description below to the blog post at mymotive.com where you can find that. That is it. Thank you to everyone who filled out this survey, and let's get back training. It's coming back. I can feel it. I'm getting that excitement. Later, Trainiacs.